Hey, how are you doing today? Good to see you. Tumbleweed here with Tumbleweed Talks. This is the second in a series called the Utopian Paradox. We'll call it part two. Got our old Tumbleweed here for sure. Um, so you know, let's let's continue to look at this paradox, this self-contradictory situation. So let's keep in mind that a paradox is indeed self contradictory. So we're going to go out on a limb here. In a government as we have in the United States today, wherein politicians and bureaucrats will go to great lengths to preserve and even increase their power by virtually any means possible short of outright anarchy, how can we, the people, regain the control that our founding fathers intended? Draining the proverbial swamp only scratches the surface, as entire industries are wrapped around the perpetuation of this government leviathan, from healthcare to energy to education and so on. It's like a metastasizing cancer on our nation. Would that folks read the Constitution and restore us to its basic government principles. President John F. Kennedy once said, "The greatest enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, realistic." See a bit of that today, don't we? Like so many folks concerned about the ever metastasizing federal government swamp, Tumbleweed has observed that the often manufactured divisiveness of politics, layered atop the bloated bureaucracy, defies credulity. As JFK notes, myths abound. If the myth suits your belief du jour, you fly to it like a moth to a light bulb. Our current president refers to these politically oriented myths as fake news. Whatever. But Tumbleweed contends that it's not really about politics and the accompanying myths, lies, exaggerations, half-truths, and sleight of hand, but an underlying paradox. There is a major philosophical contradiction at work in our nation. Consider compromise. Compromise is the finding of some middle ground that two politically disparate parties can support. I recall a definition of diplomacy as the knack of letting the other person have your way. Think on if you accept a compromise on an issue that in some part contradicts your core beliefs, you thus have become party to something that thereby may compromise your own moral principles. Politicians are used to compromise, as they quickly learn to check the latest opinion polling, as conveniently nearby lobbyists will attest, and they test the political winds of the day rather than reach into their own set of core beliefs. There are liars and there are politicians, but I repeat myself. So goes the quote often attributed to Mark Twain. Don't we feel refreshing, if not surprised, when a politician actually comes close to keeping campaign promises? Don't we? Yeah. Tumbleweed contends that the United States has become a fertile breeding ground for lies and deceit, often cloaked as, quote, news, but actually promoting seditious agendas that would totally undermine the founding principles of our nation. We dare not lose sight of Adolf Hitler's social justice reforms, Joseph Stalin's ethnic cleansings, or Pol Pot's genocidal madness, as we listen to wet behind the ears students, elitist academics, biased pseudo-journalists, and leftist progressive politicians espouse their own agendas of reform that would rip our founding principles asunder in the name of some bumper sticker worthy issue. Today's real-world outcomes of progressive, socialism-oriented entitlement culture that eschews compromise of their radical agenda, such as found in many deep blue states, find themselves in horrific social and economic troubles. A socioeconomic divide of their very own making. Big government entitlements require ever higher taxes to maintain the safety net that fast becomes a spiderweb that envelops its victims. Myths of global warming, there's no such thing as settled science. One-size-fits-all education like the Common Core disaster, rooted in an archaic Prussian model 200 years old. Racism that simply no longer exists. urban plantations that enslave the poor of all races, social justice, and the plight of women purportedly downtrodden by a male-oriented culture are all fodder for the radical agenda. Compromise isn't in the radical lexicon. Yes, it defeats their divisive purposes to maintain power. The amoral anti-establishment radicals of the 60s and 70s sowed the seeds for today's morality-compromised generation of progressive politicians, professors, lawyers, and cultural absolutists. As followers of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals playbook, these demagogues live by those myths of which JFK spoke. They spurn absolutes of right and wrong, and America seems to have lost its way. As Christian apologist and author Ravi Zacharias notes, the power to harness rebellion through media and technology is much easier. One statement in 1 minute can reach 1 million now, and all the evil will harness to it. A utopian paradox indeed. Just saying.